When Carmen and Alan Snedeker moved into their suburban home in Connecticut, they thought it was perfect. Little did they know what evil lurked inside the woodwork. They say their new house, which was once a funeral parlor, was haunted by ghosts. One of the children slept downstairs in the basement, which used to be the morgue. There, a gruesome blood-stained wall remained, along with a chain-powered body lift, once used to bring corpses from the basement to the first floor. Night after night, the family says they heard strange voices, loud music and haunting footsteps in the house, yet no one was there. Then the most chilling thing happened to Carmen while she slept next to her husband. She says she was raped and sodomized by a grotesque demon who jumped on her in bed. The Snedekers tried to get help from their neighbors and even the police, but no one seemed to listen. Finally, in a desperate cry for help, they found real-life Ghostbusters who advised them to move out immediately. The Snedekers say they've never been back since. You're probably saying to yourself about now, well, this story sounds crazy. But my guest today insists it's true. Meet Al and Carmen Snedeker. They are here with their son, Michael, and their niece, Kelly. Later in the show, we'll talk with neighbors, including one who now lives in the very same house the Snedekers claim is haunted. He says that Al and Carmen are making up the story. Carmen, we're going to start with you. You moved into this house in the first place because your son Stephen was in the middle of receiving treatments for cancer at a local hospital. And the house you moved into was a former funeral parlor. Can you take us through the layout of the house?
Yes, as you came in the front door, there was a beautiful wood entrance with an excellent hall stairway that went up to the second apartment. That's the apartment I saw first before I moved in. I didn't know it was a funeral home. When I came in the first time, the downstairs was full of workmen and woodworking things, of lumber and hammering things going on. So I saw the upstairs apartment. I didn't realize it was a funeral home. As you go through the hallway, to your left was what used to be the chapel, was our dining room. And in the back of it was the kitchen. There was a back door. As you walked out the back door, there were French doors. If you'd go in those French doors, it led down into the basement or into our bedroom. When you went into the basement, there was the morgue and where they prepared the bodies. The hoist went up into our bedroom above us. There was a blood tank to the right of the staircase. And then as you walked through there, there was the sink where they flushed the blood and things of that nature, and they prepared the bodies, and there was makeup and wax and things like that in there. There were 3 coffin pillows. Then as you come through, there was a tool room where they kept the little head things, where they put the name of the person, little metal plaques. You went on through, that was the north coffin room. That's where my son Stephen slept. That was his bedroom. You made a right, you went into the south coffin room. That's where Michael slept. As you go up the stairs, you go directly into the bathroom. Back around, there's a U shape into a beautiful living room with a sunroom. There were over 22 windows. Then there were 2 more bedrooms. Kelly and my daughter and other niece slept in the other one.
Carmen, although your children told you they heard strange sounds and noises and they saw ghosts, you didn't believe them at first?
No, I didn't believe them. I didn't believe in ghosts. I thought that they were things of imagination. I'd always been taught that. My oldest boy, Stephen, came to me the day we moved into the house, and he said, we have to leave here immediately. The house is evil. It's really evil. Something bad's going to happen if we stay. I told him that houses could not be evil because I didn't believe they could.
What changed your mind?
My mind was changed over a year later when Kelly and Trish moved in with us. One night after a date, Kelly came into the house.
Kelly's your niece?
Yes, Kelly is right beside me. She came in from a date, and she tried to go into her bed, and something started happening to her, and she came to our bedroom where I was sleeping, and she said, Aunt Carmen, come quick, it's coming again, it's happening again. I grabbed my Bible from the nightstand, and I'm saying to myself, I've got to find something to put all of these ghost stories to rest. I've had it up to here with ghost stories. I didn't believe in them. I'd never seen anything, and I thought it was all because it was a former funeral home.
Now, Kelly, you're the niece. You came to live with your aunt.
Yeah.
And you say you were molested by an entity. Tell me about that.
Well, it all started when I can't.
She came home from a date.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Kelly came in from a date, and she went into her bedroom, and she tried to lay in bed, and she felt something come up underneath the covers towards her, and it was pulling at her undergarments and touching her in her private areas. She reached over for her rosary, and the cross came off. That's when she got up and ran into the room with me. A few other things happened to her. I'll let her tell you about them if she can.
The covers would be pulling off the bed. There would be voices, a lot of scratching on the walls. The bed didn't always do it. It did it more in Aunt Carm's room than anywhere, but it would, like, breathe, kind of like.
Kelly, what did the operation look like? Did it?
It
did you see
didn't have a
person?
form. It was just a black mass.
Just a black mass.
Yeah.
Was there a hand? You said you felt something.
I felt it. You couldn't see it. I couldn't see it because it was behind me, but it was like a huge. It was just freezing cold. It was like a hand on my back, and it would just like when I was laying on this side, and this bra strap would always be pulled down, and I always slept in my undercloak, my bra and stuff went out to bed. And that's just, and it would be being tugged down. And you'd pull it back up, and it usually, when you're laying on that side, that just doesn't happen. And I got up to get the rosary, and I laid back down in the bed. And when I did that, my hand, I was holding the rosary in my hand, and it was like something was, trying to open my hand up. And it would start pulling on my covers, pulling them to the floor. And then after that happened, I got up and ran into Aunt Carm's room. And she got up to come in with me. She brought her Bible. This had happened before, something similar. And she didn't believe me. She'd just bring the Bible in, and she would sit down, and she would start telling me the Hail Mary out the rosaries and reading the Bible and trying to calm me and talk to me and tell me I was just having nightmares or something.
I truly didn't believe her. I thought that the older boy had gotten her all excited about the stories of the funeral home and the ghost he had seen. When I went into her bedroom, I sat with her, and I was opening it and reading from the Bible, and she wrapped around me. She was so excited. Can you feel it coming? Can you feel it coming, Aunt Carmen? It's coming. And I pushed her back. And the third time she did that, and I pushed her back, I saw an arm, the knuckles, the joints, and the wrist, go up under her long night shirt, up over her breast, and back through the wall. At that point, I realized something was going on. I grabbed her, ran into what used to be the chapel to use the phone. And there's where I called.
All right, Al, you say strange things were happening to you and Carmen at night when you were in bed. In order to fully understand, we want you to show us what happened. We have a bed here today that is about the size of the bed, which was in the house. So we're going to set the scene. Now, you're about ready to tuck in for the night when all of a sudden you hear music like this. What happened next?
Well, Sally, the music would wake me up at night. I'd be sound asleep. I would hear the music playing, and I would say to myself, what is that? And I would lie there for 5 or 10 minutes and listen to it. Along with the music, I could hear 3 or 4 voices. There were older men chatting back and forth, back and forth.
What did you initially think the music was?
It sounded like
30s
music from an old Victrola player.
He thought someone was in the house when all of this was going on, and
I used to get up every night, go down the stairs. First couple times, I would just go down and start looking. But each time I went down, I started getting more and more nervous and afraid for some reason. I started bringing a baseball bat with me. I started going through the boys' room, through the coffin room area where the chain body lift was.
No one is playing the radio, and the boys are asleep, and they're in their
everybody
bed.
would be sound asleep. It got to the point where I got so afraid when I was going down there, I started bringing a gun with me. And one night I woke Carmen up. I said, Carmen, I said, I got to stop doing this. I'm afraid I'm going to shoot one of our children.
Wow.
he was really afraid that one of the kids would be standing up in the room when he'd go around the corner, and he would fire because he was so frightened himself. And he'd come back up and to get into bed. Now, when we used to get into bed, it only happened to us not at the same... Yeah, we were never awake at the same time. But the bed would begin to vibrate. and it would be a gentle vibration at first, and it got worse and worse. There were other things that happened. The bed, as Kelly said, had a pulse and a heartbeat.
Like a heartbeat, yeah.
And when you were in your bed, it would come and lift the covers and tug at them.
But there was a pulse and a heartbeat in the bed.
In the bed, and you could feel it. Someone else could go up and touch it and feel it, people that had not lived in the house. And we had this thing that would walk around the bed. It had really small feet, like a cat. We didn't have a cat. It would walk around the bed, and if it sat down, it would be as an adult male sitting, the impression of the bed.
The feet were light, but the weight of what happened
The feet
on the
were
bed.
about the size of this, a cat's feet.
Al, you said something else happened to you that is very difficult to talk about even today. Can you share it with us?
Yes. One night, we were lying in bed. Carmen had already had fallen asleep. I felt this strange sensation coming over my body. It started at my feet and started climbing up through my body. Before I had a chance to reach over to Carmen to tell her something was wrong, I was froze. I couldn't move. And then I felt this stinging penetration in my anal area. And I was trying to scream, to cry out to Carmen to help me somehow. And I couldn't move. After a while, I don't know how long, it had gone away. There was no more sensation. I woke Carmen up and I said, Carmen, I think I was just sodomized by this demon.
This happened to me as well, Sally. It was a tedious kind of pain that happened. It was horrible pain. It was so penetrating and so much pain. There was no pleasure in this. And when it would take me, sexually assault me, it would laugh with such pleasure. It enjoyed what it was doing to me, and I was so terrified I couldn't move. It was the most crippling thing I've ever been through in my life, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Now, Michael, you actually saw ghosts? What did they look like to you?
It took different forms. When I seen it, I would see it in different shapes. The first time I seen the ghost, it appeared in cat-like eyes glowing up on the ceiling, looking down at my bed. And the second time I seen it, it appeared as my little sister. The lights were taken out of the sockets on the ceiling. And I looked over, because they were flashing on and off, and there was no bulbs in there. And I looked over, and it looked like my sister, and she was laughing at it when she was flicking off the switch like that. And then I got up to go over to her, and she went running up the stairs. And I went into the living room where my mom and cousin were, and I asked them if Jenny just came running through, and they said, no, she's been in bed all night. And I said, 5 minutes ago, she was down in my room turning on and off the lights.
And you knew that that wasn't so. Did it have a voice, any kind of a strange?
It had several voices. Sometimes it would take on the voice of one of the children to come into the room. It would say, Mommy, Mommy, and it would be the sweet voice of your child. And you turn, and there would be this dark presence of a smoke figure just standing there laughing at you. And then other times it had the deep, raspy voice where it would insult and shout profane things and insult you. It was horrible.
When we come back, we're going to hear more about this bizarre story, and we'll hear just how desperate the Snedekers were trying to get rid of the evil spirits. They called the neighbors, called the police, and no one was willing to help. But they did find a solution, and we'll find out what it was when we return. Family. Carmen says 4 years ago she moved into a house that was formerly a funeral parlor. And Carmen says it was haunted and terrible things happened to her and her family. Carmen, I have to ask you, why did you just pick up your family and leave?
Sally, that would have been the first choice we would have had, but every time we did leave the house, it would follow us. I'd go to work, and the computer system would go down, or the phone system would go down. The people at work are the ones that gave me the phone number to the people that finally helped me. My husband went to work. His car, he parked and went inside the building. As he did, the car started back up and drove into the building. We didn't want our family members harmed by whatever was harming us. It was bad enough.
Carmen, I'd like to ask you is, how many children do you have, and were they all affected?
We have 4 children and 2 nieces, and everyone was affected, along with
And
some
where are
friends.
the other children now?
They're young. There's a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old that I want to protect, and the oldest one's in school in Massachusetts.
They were kind of scared or nervous to be on the show.
Oh, terrified.
One of them was given drugs or taken to a psychiatric hospital?
Yes, that was the oldest boy. I didn't believe that anything he was telling me was true. I asked his oncologist who had been treating him if that could be a side effect from the cancer treatments he was receiving. They said no, so I took him to a psychologist.
Was there any medical evidence that either of you had been raped? Did you go to a doctor and get physically examined?
Why would we? I mean, we couldn't see it. How did we expect anyone else to believe us?
But you felt a stinging pain?
It wasn't like a normal rape, not person-to-person type.
Carmen, there was one point where you say you actually were possessed by a demonic force, and you, Al, say you witnessed it. Can you tell us about it?
This was one of the most terrifying events that happened in the house. I've drawn some sketches, if I may. We had been outside just kidding around. The researchers were in the house, my husband, my niece, and upon going back to bed, I sat down and I was no longer in my room. I was in a dark room. I don't know if you can catch this on camera. I was in complete darkness. I couldn't feel the temperature of my skin. I couldn't hear myself speak. I couldn't see anything but blackness. I knew I was no longer in my room. The entity opened up a hole, and he started shouting obscenities at me. And when I began to pray the Our Father, he got worse. And he said, there's no way you could possibly believe what you've been taught as a child. I went into this place. It was called Ithram, a desert road of hot tears, and I was taken down this road. These represent souls, lost souls. I could actually feel the emotion, the anger, the hurt, the desperation, the sadness. There were no positive emotions. They were all human, negative emotions. And they were palatable. They just went through my skin. I knew it. I felt such compassion for these souls. But I couldn't leave the road. I was warned against it. I was there for 8 hours.
Has there ever been any research or anything saying, you know, trying to find out who exactly these spirits were?
Yes.
Yes.
We had some researchers come in on the night that I discovered that there were other entities in the house. I called some people called the Warrens. Someone at work had told me that she believed the things my children were telling me was true, and she asked me to go to Ed and Lorraine's museum with her. She gave me their number to call and make an appointment. I never did. I just kept the number in my wallet. That night I called it.
And did they help you?
They stayed with us for 9 weeks.
9 weeks?
9 weeks, every night. Every night.
And there was also somebody else who went in and documented all this?
They're researchers. They had 3 researchers that came in the house and stayed 9.5 weeks. They worked during the day. They did not accept any pay for what they did for us. And they experienced phenomena from the very first night they walked into our house.
You know definitely that it is a male spirit?
No, there is no gender in the spirit's world. There's... These were called incubus and succubus, but I'll let the researchers tell you more about that later on.
Later, we're going to meet the Ghostbusters who helped Carmen and her family, but next, the neighbors we found while investigating this case who say, gee, they don't believe a word of the Snedeker story. Don't go away.
That you were molested. Now, were you ever molested outside of your home? Did they follow you? Like you said that they would follow you if you would leave.
One night I ran down the street with Kelly, being sodomized the whole way.
Whoa. Yes, you had a question.
Hi, I was wondering what the police thought when you told them that.
The policeman almost shot my bedroom door when the door began to open by itself when he was in there.
And your question?
Well, Sally, I'd just like to know, if they were molested in their beds, why didn't you just leave that next morning?
You have children to worry about.
Exactly.
Where can we go?
Anywhere.
Where can we go?
Anywhere. Not just a matter of that. What about the fact that everywhere we went,
it followed
us. And the other outsiders, should we drag in our parents, our grandparents, our nieces and nephews? We have larger families.
That would happen to them?
Around this time of year, we do hear a lot of tall tales about ghosts, goblins, things that go bump in the night. So far today, we've heard some pretty horrifying ghost stories that our guests claim are no tall tales. They're true. Carmen says as soon as she and her family moved into their new house, which used to be a funeral parlor, strange things began to happen. So far, we've heard about the music in the middle of the night, the voices out of nowhere, and some pretty serious accusations, including rape and sodomy by an evil spirit, whatever it is. While we were investigating this story, we came across some people who live in the Snedeker's old neighborhood. And they say they have some serious doubts about the Snedeker's story. In fact, they say the Snedekers are making the whole thing up. Meet Richard, Yvonne, and Jim. Richard, why don't you believe the Snedeker story?
Well, I think the most obvious reason for me was the inconsistencies in it. We were moving into the Southington area from another town, found the apartment. We liked the apartment. I mentioned it to some coworkers who work in that town and live in that town. And, of course, the whole haunted house story came out with them.
Now, you moved into their apartment after they left?
Correct, the same one they were living in.
Oh, okay.
When all this was supposedly happening. I think I researched it with my wife. We talked to people. As a matter of fact, a close relatives of yours told me that there was nothing to it, that you were making it up just for the money.
Could you tell me which relative you spoke to? Because I have very few relatives in the area, and I had a relative of mine contact me saying that people that were living in there wanted an exorcism.
Wanted us to come there.
When was this?
This was a year ago.
I was living
now,
there.
Let me ask you, on the dining room floor, do you see 5 toes and a heel and an imprint in red? Because it was there and did not leave.
Floor.
Yes.
No.
Is it hardwood?
It's hardwood floor. There is no impression.
There was when I left.
I've been to every part of the house. There have been
Is the body lift still there?
The body lift is out now. It was there.
It was there when I moved in.
It did nothing. I have small children myself, as a matter of fact. I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and I have seen nothing that.
Richard,
that
I really don't want any harm to come to you, but we did have an exorcism.
My question,
I've been there 3
I don't think
years.
I'm lucky though. My question, my response to this is, if the ghost followed you down the street, you were so concerned that the ghost was going to harm your relatives, your friends, then the house wasn't haunted. The ghosts were from you.
After you, that's right.
Because I have had
blame the
nothing.
house.
I have not heard a creaking board.
Right.
I have not heard anything that would suggest that that house is haunted whatsoever.
Let me talk to Yvonne.
Sally, can I just say one thing?
Obviously, the exorcism worked then. You're very lucky.
There was no exorcism.
I don't think there was an exorcism.
Here's the dig down 12 inches behind every corner of the house. 12 inches, there is an exorcism medal. And there are also other things that you can find there. There's all kinds in the tool room. I cannot give you.
Oh, I talked
no
to
Catholic priest within like 100 miles of this place has ever set foot in your house since the last funeral was performed by the previous owners.
You know,
you people say you didn't know that it was a funeral home. The picture that was supplied by whoever that was taken last year, the sign that says funeral home, is still on the front of the house. If they show the picture,
she was showed the top apartment.
Cover up.
They were
by
signs on the front door. They got pictures. They got pictures of you in the newspaper, which they also showed. Right next to you, right behind you.
It's right there.
If you look right behind you on the picture,
it's covered up with plywood. It's covered up.
It was not covered up until this whole thing.
You did not live there when I did.
I
do not know.
I have been there 3 years, lady.
I have other witnesses that did say it was covered.
Why did nothing was ever said. Nothing was ever said until you got behind in your rent, and that's when it started.
No, you know what happened?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You guys were both.
I have an attorney that will dispute that.
Yvonne, the landlord, you sent a check.
My
never
question-
got there. You could never come
Okay,
up
my
with
question was around the same kind of thing. One, it sounds a little bit dramatized by the wife, the whole idea of the ghost and the spirits and everything. It sounds somewhat dramatic. I've heard people talk about ghosts and spirits, and I'm not saying that that can't happen, but it just sounds very, very dramatic,
didn't happen here.
the way that you're explaining it. The other thing is I was wondering if you have a book out And 2, if you were either behind in your mortgage
why we're here.
or your rent. Because that could be cause for the dramatization.
No.
Or the
No, that's not true.
No, we were not behind in our rent.
Yvonne, you were saying it was for money. Why?
Yes, that's what it is. Even the landlord said they got behind. He never had a problem until they got behind in the rent. Then all of a
The
sudden,
landlord knew there was a problem with that house.
No, the landlord didn't know.
Wait a minute. If the landlord said there was a problem in the house,
Ask his daughter.
There was a lady living upstairs
Sally.
in the house. The whole time this was going on, there was an apartment upstairs. This lady got disgusted. She got moved out because she was disgusted with all the publicity that was going on.
What did she say, Tammy? She experienced
experienced
to me and
nothing.
talked to me. Yes, she did. You were not there. You
I've been in that place.
She was there.
Researchers.
Yes.
And she allowed the priest in.
Then why did she tell the TV people that nothing happened? Why did she tell us that nothing happened? Why did she tell the newspaper that nothing happened?
She told me she had a reputation to uphold.
When I took this rent, I work at Food Mart, and Father Kabbalah, who's been a priest in the Immaculate Conception Church
In Southington.
in Southington
He's the
for
one that told us
25
forget
years.
about it.
25 years.
Yeah.
And I told, he was a friend of mine, and I said, I'm moving in the Hallahan house. He said, Yvonne, there was never anything there.
That's baloney.
And I said, well, if there is,
We
they're going to
went
have
to
to learn
him.
to live with
We
me.
went to him,
and he
and
said,
we talked to him.
my
He said
money's
there was
on
nothing
you,
there.
Yvonne. Those were his exact words.
Sure.
I'm
There's
one
a lot
of
of
the
money
neighbors.
in Southington, that's why.
And I don't believe in ghosts until some of this occurred. When I came home from work one night, I visited my neighbor next door. Her name was Joan. And I was very set back with the fact that all of a sudden her kids had crucifixes on. And she had crucifixes all over her house. And I asked her what the problem was, and she was extremely upset. At this time, she didn't want to tell me, and she was... Finally, I pried it from her. She had said to me that she had been in the Snedeker house. While she was there, she had been in the cellar. In the cellar, she had this very strong, pungent odor that made her very, very sick. She said she felt like throwing up and had to get out of there. Another time, on another occasion, she was sitting talking to Carmen. I believe it was in her dining room. I'm not 100% sure. It was the dining room or the kitchen. And she says while she was sitting talking to her, she felt something bite her or sting her on her backside or the thigh of her leg, and it was extremely painful. When she looked down, there was absolutely nothing there.
So you believe the Snedeker story because your friend believes it?
Well, I'll tell you, I was uncomfortable with things I saw. I did hear that one of the priests from one of the churches did go in there, and he did not believe what had gone in, but I did see other priests go in and out of there. I will be honest to say what I did see. And I did not experience anything other than that.
But your friend did?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm also a neighbor. And Joan and her husband were to our next door neighbor's house for a pool party when we were there. And when Joan went into the house to tend her babies, her husband said that there had been some funny things going on and that he was concerned for his wife. Well, this was in July. We had been hearing odd noises about 3 o'clock in the morning. So I decided to put a journal next to the bed and write down what went on during the night.
So you're a neighbor who everything that happened at night, you would document?
Right. And I discovered that there were usually things going on in the neighborhood that explained the things they put in the newspaper.
Such as?
Oh, when the chains would rattle. One time at 3 o'clock in the morning, a car, in fact, there were 3 cars this particular night, the noise woke us up. And they would hide in the shadows of a tree down the street, and then they would come driving by. But if anything else came by, they would take off very fast, like they didn't want to be seen. One of the trucks had a bad muffler, and it really rattled our house as well as anybody else around. There were chains dragged.
So you're saying that
when
what we saw
heavier
was
trucks went down the road, around that time some repairs had been done in the road, and heavy trucks would come down, and when they'd hit this repair in the road, it would rattle all the houses around us.
Excuse me, I don't mean to be disrespectful.
How can
I
a
like
car
this
make that
woman.
kind of vibration?
But what we experienced was not a traffic problem. It was in the house. The floor was clutter. What about the covers coming off? What about the sodomization? What about the apparitions my children saw?
The whole point, though, Sally, the whole point with this is, I have a 7- and a 6-year-old home. They have 4 kids or 5 kids that were in the house. If the board creaked in the house, I'd have my kids out of there that night. I don't care if I had to sleep on the street or in the car, in a local motel. You're going to tell me that you experienced all this and you kept your kids there for 2 years?
Oh, we didn't.
That's ridiculous. Financially, I'm not financially well off, but I'll sleep under high
The priest they named in the newspaper as having come in and blessed the house and worked with them did not go into that house.
I'm sorry?
He had not been in that house since Mrs. Hallahan's funeral.
Who?
Priest.
Mrs. Hallahan is
when that article was in the newspaper naming
You call the Archdiocese and you'll find out.
You should have cleaned your binoculars.
There is the sign that says Hallahan Funeral Home. This is a dated newspaper picture.
Ma'am, I hate to tell you, but it was covered up
with a light over
by plywood when I lived in that house and when I looked at it.
Not when you got there. It was not covered up till after the whole started.
It was not.
That's wrong.
Next, we're going to meet the real-life Ghostbusters, who Al and Carmen say saved their lives when, along with a priest, they performed an exorcism in their house. See if we can figure out who the priest was. Take a break. Carmen and their family about a chilling story. They wrote a book about it called In a Dark Place, the story of a true haunting. And they wrote this book along with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who have been with us before. They are the professional Ghostbusters, who Al and Carmen said saved their lives. Ed, you both launched an investigation into the house and you discovered a very shocking thing that actually happened in the funeral parlor involving the bodies. What happened?
Well, we feel through our investigation that necrophilia, or abuse of corpses, had occurred in that home. Not necessarily by the undertaker, it could be anybody that went in there. Now, this case is not as isolated as these three people would have us think. We have over 70 cases very similar to the Snedekers. And remember that the church was involved in this.
Who was the priest? Everyone seems to have a disagreement.
We can tell you that the chancellery was involved. The priest that was involved there was a Father A, who was on 2020. And there was also 3 other priests, and this can be borne out through the official records of the chancellery in Hartford.
Yes.
How about a name? Just one name.
Father A is the name I give you. I don't have to give
a name, a full name.
I can prove. These are secret things. We are Catholic,
if it's
and we
secret, you're sitting here talking about being raped and sodomized by some sort of entity, but you won't give a name.
It was all backed up.
I'm telling you what happened to me. I'm not telling you. You gotta believe me.
We had investigators.
I am telling you what happened.
Were you in the house?
No.
I've been standing. I lived across the street before you.
Were you in the house?
Still lived there.
One of the ones that came around the house go boo boo through the window.
No, once you guys started doing this and it got to the paper.
Sounds like something you do.
Oh, very likely.
You're probably one of the guys I chased down the street.
I'd like to know how much you
Why would I run all the way down the street?
Especially you are getting paid off by the landlord to do this kind of stuff. Because you know
how much money are you making today?
You know as well as we do that what went on in that house actually occurred. We have the proof. We have people out here, investigators, who went through the same things as the Snedekers.
Ed?
I don't know what happened in the house and what didn't, but I lived next to the house for over 25 years, and I haven't been in there in over 15 years, but I do know that when they moved into the house, there was no sign that said Hallahan Funeral Home. The sign exists. It is, you know, to the right side of the door, but it was covered with plywood for years now. It's been covered up ever since the Hallahans moved out. It does not say Hallahan's Funeral Home on it anymore. And people moved into the home after the Snedekers left, and left very quickly after they did, before they moved in.
So there was an interim family that you think was disturbed too. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I have a question.
Jeff's another neighbor.
As you know, well, as you said before, your son had cancer, and he was taking many drugs.
Yes.
Did he or did he not tell you that he was also taking other illegal substances?
I'm aware that he did take other illegal substances.
He used to come over to our house and tell us that whatever we wanted, we could get and whatnot. He also...
I don't know what he told you, and I'm not aware of his teenage boyhoods, but I did take him to a psychologist, remember, and I did have a great deal of interest in what happened to my son, and he has grown up a great deal, and he told the psychologist, and to this day will still tell you, there were ghosts in the house.
But how
I think that these are all very contributing factors to why the phenomena was as intense as it was in that particular home.
Maybe
but realize
the ghost didn't like the use of drugs. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Drugs heighten the sensitivity. We know that when a person takes drugs, they're almost in the same state as a clairvoyant. But if you ask the gentleman who's sitting right over there, who spent 9 weeks in the house, what he had also had happened to him, similar attacks.
Where's the gentleman?
Right there.
Yes. What happened to you?
We were there for 9.5 weeks trying to help Carmen and Snedeker. When we go in on these cases, we have to document...
Who's we?
The researchers. I work with Ed and Lorraine doing their investigating. I'm one of the persons that was in there for the 9.5 weeks. I'm amazed at hearing all these people that weren't even in the home. You weren't there. You weren't witness to it. A neighbor sitting here with a book, a whole journal, stating on what took place in this case. She documented things around the clock. Why didn't you come over to see if you could help the family? Why didn't you see if you could offer some help? You're saying there was no priest there. I know there was priest there. The Roman Catholic Church was involved with this. Now you want us to turn around and give you the name of the priest. He prefers to stay anonymous.
They said was there.
No,
he
you
said
don't.
he was not there. I said I have the newspaper clipping with his name
I've never
in it.
publicized
And he
one
said
time.
that he was not there. But
Can
they
I see it?
had published. They also published that they were not writing a book and were not going to
We
write a
weren't
book.
at the time, lady.
Well, you
were
sure
approached 2
did.
years later.
We insisted that it would be good for them to write a book because people like these out here would know that there is help for them if this ever occurred to them.
Sally,
you know,
I have to be
This
honest.
journal
as
around the
well as I
clock,
do
but
that
I
we're-
have
I
license
made a
plate
journal
numbers,
too, but I didn't bring
descriptions
it
of the
with me.
vehicles, and
It's
when
on a
kids
computer
were
disc.
pestering you, yelling in your windows, we called the police. The Poolers called the police. Other neighbors called the police.
I know.
and we
I have
caught
respect
kids
for that.
messing around the house.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I have
So then
great
you know what we
respect
went
for
through.
you.
Carmen, let me ask this woman.
it?
Let me get this woman's opinion.
I'd like to know why you think that they would fabricate something so absurd to get money when there's other ways of getting money. And I also don't think it's right that you demean their son for doing drugs. There are a lot of kids who have problems, and it doesn't happen just in people's houses who supposedly have drugs.
Okay, answer.
The point I was trying to make was that some of the drugs he was taking would allow him to see things.
Hallucinogenic?
Exactly. LSD.
But supposedly it was not only one son who saw it, it was the whole family.
That's right.
Just because one son is doing drugs does
Now
not
we
mean
were
the
all
whole
on
family is going to be
LSD?
affected by it and see it.
What about my three?
Okay, neighbors.
Sally.
Do you want to answer? Go
I
ahead.
was just going to, he said what I was going to say. You know, you take a lot of drugs, you start to see funny
The whole
things.
family was on drugs?
My 3-year-old
Come
son
on.
was
Philip was
You're
not
little
there
kids.
the whole time. He wasn't there. He was put into...
Do you know that the priest who went into that house had experiences so bad in their own rectories that they wouldn't even go back into that house again.
Sally,
And the home was exercised.
Let me let's get to Lorraine. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Who you are and you...
Who is a skeptic on this whole matter? Joe, you say the investigations the Warrens conducted is baloney. Why?
Well, I've investigated haunted houses for some 20 years and a professional
Is there such a
psychologist.
thing?
Pardon?
Is there such a thing?
I've not met a house that I thought was haunted. I think the Warrens have never met a house that they didn't think was haunted.
I think that you are mistaken.
I was on the show with
pattern-
this man once before.
It's my turn.
You made a statement.
I've heard that you were a
You have a
loudmouth who
statement.
shouted people down. Just give me my chance
No,
to
I
talk.
won't give you a chance.
You did that to me last show we
say
were
a bunch
on.
of lies.
Joe,
We
I'll
have
give
the
you your
evidence, we have the
chance.
proof.
You're a loudmouth, Warren, and
No,
we
you're
all
the
know
loudmouth.
it, but if you'll just let me finish.
When you're concerned, I'm a loudmouth.
Go ahead, Joe.
Try to
You
show
haven't even heard
a
nothing.
little
Joe,
class.
I
You're
don't
on
have a
national
lot of
TV.
time.
No, I'm not going to
Just-
give class to somebody who's
Ed,
sitting here.
let
You'll have
Joe-
nothing but
Ed,
lying.
Ed, let Joe just explain.
Be careful who you
point
call
by
a
point.
liar.
Well, what would
Go
you do
ahead.
about it?
Guys, Joe, point by point.
Yes, one thing that the houses that sincere people report that they think are haunted usually follow certain patterns. This is a hodgepodge of the sort of ghost tale, poltergeist, part demon, part
you
this,
there?
part that.
Were you there?
We saw a similar pattern with the Amityville Horror, a case that the Warrens thought was genuine.
We didn't think
it turned out to be a blatant
Nobody
hoax
ever proved that.
concocted over several bottles of wine.
Can
the
you
evidence,
prove it?
yes, I
No,
can
you
prove
can't.
it. Yes,
You
I
cannot
can.
prove
It's
it.
been proven.
No, it has never been
The evidence
proven.
is very clear in the case of the Amityville Horror.
No,
and the whole
no way.
packaging of this story, the book says it's for Halloween release. The book was written by a professional fiction writer who writes horror stories.
Joe,
This whole packaging is a crock.
Joe, does the church admit to exorcism?
He's an atheist. How would he know?
According to a newspaper article that I have, the Bridgeport newspaper, the diocese refuses to confirm that they had any exorcism there.
It wasn't
if there
done by
was,
the
if there
Sally,
was
I
an
have a
exorcism,
tape of
I
an
don't understand
exorcism
why
from a
there is
priest.
any reason why they can't come out and say so.
We've
I don't
had
understand
priests
the
on
need
the
for
show
the
when we've
secrecy.
talked about exorcism.
If I
Take a
can
break.
prove
We'll be
that there
right
was an exorcism,
But the sheer fact that this family, in their hearts and in their minds, believe that this happened has to be overwhelming, and my heart goes out to you, whether it happened or not.
Thank you
very much.
Yes.
Well, I really feel like the only thing missing from your description of your first trip into the house is a corpse. I mean, blood on the walls and wax and makeup. And you also sound like you're reading a script. I'm not saying spirits and ghosts don't exist, but you sound so rehearsed.
Oh, I'm sorry
Next.
that you feel that way.
Yeah, I was wondering, you've been talking about two different kinds of ghosts coming in. Are they either male or female, or is it always a male that's in your home?
No, ghosts have no gender, I don't think. I'm not sure, but I don't believe they have a gender.
Yes.
I would like to know if you bought this house by a real estate agent, and if this real estate
didn't buy
agent
it.
ever told you anything.
It was rented, and no, they did not tell us anything.
Question.
Yes, I'd like to know if y'all still being haunted by these ghosts.
No, we're not. The exorcism apparently worked. Our audience does not believe. Thanks to my guests, and whatever you believe about the story, the book is worth picking up. It's called In a Dark Place, The Story of a True Haunting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some members of our audience will receive, and a promotional fee has been provided by